Under Prime Minister Modi and Netanyahu's leadership, India has shown it is willing to stand shoulder to shoulder with its friend Israel against 159 other nations of the world. New Delhi has refused to sign a letter backed by 104 nations plus the 55-member African Union condemning the declaration of UN Chief Secretary Antonio Guterres as a persona non grata by Israel. This is yet another instance of New Delhi showcasing unwavering support for Israel as the nation dared to ban UN Chief Antonio Guterres from entering Israel territory, even accused Guterres of siding with Iran and Gaza-based Hamas, the terror group which carried out the horrific October 7th massacre, killing over 1,000 civilians in Israel last year. Ministry of External Affairs Secretary Narendra said, quote, Mr. Antonio Guterres is the UN Secretary General. He's the United Nations Secretary General for us. What somebody else says about it, what the third person says, is not our area of outlook or a matter to comment on, unquote. The bold stand taken by India displays the strong India-Israel partnership and friendship driven by camaraderie between Modi and Netanyahu. However, it caused a stir back home, with opposition Congress leaders slamming the Modi government for not condemning the Jewish state. In 2017, Prime Minister Modi became the very first Indian Prime Minister to visit Israel since the two countries established diplomatic ties in 1992. Since then, New Delhi's ties and friendship with Tel Aviv has grown stronger than ever before. But why has Israel banned the UN Chief Guterres? Israeli Foreign Minister has justified his country's decision, saying the United Nations failed to, quote, unequivocally condemn Iran's missile attack. CADS also called out the UN chief for not denouncing atrocities committed by Hamas when it infiltrated and massacred over 1,000 people, mostly Israeli civilians, on October 7th last year, and recorded the heinous crimes for propaganda. Israel has instead accused the UN of supporting, quote, terrorists, rapists and murderers from Hamas, Hezbollah and Houthis, and now Iran, the mothership of global terror, unquote. Meanwhile, Jerusalem Post says the ban on Guterres is part of a broader Israeli pushback against the UN, which it alleges is driven by an Arab and Islamic anti-Israel bloc. Israel also claims agencies like the UNRWA or the United Nations Relief and Works agencies affiliated with Hamas. In a war of words, the Secretary General's spokesperson immediately hit out at the Israeli Foreign Minister and said that his statement was merely political and outrightly rejected the concept of persona non grata as applying to UN staff. Now, during a meeting of the UN Security Council in early October, Guterres did condemn Iran, but only after Israel had already banned him. The ban on the UN chief comes a month after Israeli Prime Minister Netanyahu labeled the United Nations as an anti-Semitic swamp, after the UN was used to pass a series of resolutions against Israeli retaliation against Hamas in Gaza and called for a ceasefire of this conflict. Coming back to India's stance, it has always backed Israel's right to defend itself against terror attacks like the one carried out by Hamas. On the 28th of October 2023, India abstained on voting on a resolution during a UN General Assembly meeting that called for a humanitarian truce and ceasefire in Gaza, stating it did not include explicit condemnation of the October 7th terror attack in Israel. India's posture, which is known to be steadfast and consistent, sternly believed there can be no equivocation on terror. New Delhi called for condemnation of the attacks and said, quote, terrorism is a malignancy and knows no borders, nationality or race. The world should not buy into any justification of terror acts, unquote. External Affairs Minister S. Jaishankar, later pointing fingers at Pakistan-sponsored terrorism, justified New Delhi's move, saying Indians were big victims of terrorism and were therefore sympathetic to Israel. Given its strong ties with Israel, India also became part of 13 countries that abstained from voting on UN Human Rights Council resolution that not only sought an arms embargo on Israel, but also an immediate ceasefire in Gaza. Then, on September 19th this year, India abstained from another UN resolution that called on Israel to end the illegal occupation of Palestinian territories within a year. India's Israel tilt can be explained by the deepening of diplomatic and defense ties. Accounting for 37% of Israel's total arms exports, India has become the largest foreign buyer of Israeli weapons and military equipment. Israel, along with the United States and the UAE, are also part of what diplomatic circles name the West Asian Quad or the I2U2. while Israel firmly stood as India's brother-in-arms during the 2008 Mumbai terror attacks carried out by Pakistani terrorists. According to data from the CIPRI Arms Transfer Database compiled by the Observer Research Foundation, India's purchase of weapons from Israel have risen steeply. Half of India's air defense is Israeli heritage. The majority of Indian ships carry Israeli radars. Other weaponry purchased from Israel include missiles like Python, BB-RAM, Striker loitering munition, Griffin guided bombs, Heron and Herop drones, and Barak air defense system. These have proved to be an asset for the Indian Army and Indian military in curbing infiltration along the line of control with Pakistan and in counter-insurgency operations. Israel has bolstered India's defense technology as well. Israel Aerospace Industries and India's DRDO jointly developed the Barak 8 air and missile defense system. IAI is also working with the HAL to convert second-hand Boeing 767 aircraft to mid-air refuelers for the Indian Air Force. Combining Israeli innovation with Indian expertise, Israel Aerospace Industries, a leading aerospace and defense company, inaugurated its Indian subsidiary, Aerospace Services India or ASI in March. However, India has several times attempted to strike a balancing act in the conflict, believing that only dialogue and diplomacy can bring an end to this standoff and that war is not a solution. However, on October 13th, India did join a statement by a select group of nations contributing troops to the United Nations Interim Force in Lebanon, or the UNIFIL, signaling an alignment against Israeli military action that wounded 2 UN peacekeepers in Lebanon. India, being one of the first nations in 1988 to recognize the state of Palestine, has repeatedly pushed for the need for a two-state solution, keeping in mind sympathy for Palestinian civilians. However, New Delhi has none of that sympathy for the Hamas terror group or its backers in this fight. In May this year, India again backed a two-state solution for Palestine and endorsed the state's full membership in the United Nations. Ambassador Ruchira Kamboj, then India's permanent representative to the United Nations, stated, quote, "India is committed to supporting a two-state solution where the Palestinian people are able to live freely in an independent country within secure borders with due regard to the security needs of Israel," unquote. However, India's recent stand backing Israel against 159 other nations shows New Delhi will never abandon its friend in need and will always take a stand against terrorism in all its forms. Do you believe Modi government is right in backing Israel? Leave a comment with your opinion and subscribe to Inconnect News for more updates on defense and geopolitics.